So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The agenda for today's lecture is designing the economic layer once a regulatory control system has been designed that robustly closes all the independent material and energy balances. How do we go about adjusting key set points in the regulatory layer so that our process operation is economically optimal or near optimal? So, considerations in economic operation of integrated chemical processes and the implementation of economic set points. We're going to look at that today. So, let's get on with it. It's a good idea to recapitulate whatever we have done because we've done quite a bit and carry those key ideas with us in our minds when we look at economic considerations. So, plant-wide control basics. Well, you need a plant-wide control system to drive all inventory accumulation terms to zero so that the plant can operate around a steady state. Steady state operation ensures safety and stability. So, at the very least, you need a regulatory control system for closing all the independent material and energy balances in a plant. Now, given a robust regulatory control system that ensures steady process operation, the next question that you ask is, what steady state should I operate at so that my operation is economically optimal or near optimal in some sense? And these economic optimum criteria typically could be minimizing expensive utility consumption or maximizing production and so on and so forth. And this is typically implemented in a layered fashion in a plant-wide control system for a plant. So at the bottom you've got the regulatory control layer which ensures safe and stable operation, and the regulatory control layer is what is moving the control valves, your control degrees of freedom to close the material and energy balances. On top of the regulatory control layer you've got the economic layer, and the economic layer has got a supervisory control layer which is essentially an active constraint control manager, and then an optimization layer. But basically our understanding has to be that the regulatory layer set points that have a significant impact on economics, these are adjusted by the economic layer slowly. Okay, so that's the plant-wide control hierarchy that we typically have in chemical processes, continuous chemical processes. Now, when you are designing the regulatory plant-wide control system, the key issue is what to control. Well, first and foremost, throughput or production rate. You will have to choose a throughput manipulator, and once the throughput manipulator has been selected, the inventory control system, the loops for closing material and energy balances are designed around that throughput manipulator. So what to control? Well, you got to control the throughput, and then you got to regulate all the independent inventories which comes from a degrees of freedom analysis, and these inventories are reflected in levels and pressure, that's material inventory. Energy inventories are reflected in temperature if it's sensible effects, or vapor pressure if it's latent heat, liquid to vapor conversion, latent heat effects. Component inventories are reflected in composition measurements. In distillation columns, the tray temperature is an inferential measure of composition, because if the heavy key on a tray increases, the temperature of that tray will increase. So an increasing tray temperature indirectly reflects increase of heavy key on the tray, and so on and so forth. So tray temperature can be an inferential measurement of component inventory. Once you've figured out what to control, then the next issue is how tightly do you want to control these inventories, and energy inventories typically are tightly controlled. On the other hand, surge level inventories such as reflux drum level or a bottom sump level, or any tank that has been put in place in order to filter out flow disturbances, flow transients, surge level inventories are to be loosely controlled. On the other hand, reactor levels need to be tightly controlled because you want to operate at maximum level so that single pass conversion is maximized, and so on and so forth. So degree of tightness of control is the next decision that you make. First you figure out what to control in order to close all the independent material energy balances and where to set throughput, and once you've done that, then you sort of have in your head how tightly do you want to control these things. product quality you would like to control very tightly. Once you've decided what you want to control and how tightly you want to control it, then the next issue is what to manipulate. And typically, if you look at the material balances, one of the rules of thumb is you manipulate the largest term on the right hand side of that inventory balance, and this is called Richardson's rule. It's named after a process engineer from Union Carbide. And then the other rule of thumb is pair close. Control level on a column, control level on the bottom of a distillation column using something on the distillation column, something close by, because that will give fast dynamics, and fast dynamics will ensure that the closed loop control is tight if you want it to be tight. On the other hand, if the dynamics is slow, there is no way you can have tight control. Okay, so these are some of the rules of thumbs and common sense driven thinking that goes around into designing a robust regulatory plant-wide control system. Now, the key decision, like I told in the design of the regulatory control system, is the throughput manipulator location. The throughput manipulator location can be flexible, and when it is flexible is when you have large storage tanks supplying fresh feeds, so you don't really have to have the throughput manipulator at the fresh feed, you can have it anywhere in the plant. And because there is a large tank supplying raw material to the plant, raw feed to the plant, fresh feed to the plant, variability in the storage tank level is acceptable, and this allows control structures that bring in fresh feeds as makeup streams. And as we have discussed, fresh feeds coming in as makeup streams mitigate the snowball effect, take care of non-linearity, make sure that you never overfeed the system. There's also dynamic advantages, as we saw in the level control tanks in series level control example. Usually plant designs have large recycle rates, so the design will typically be in the snowballing region, and then capacity bottlenecks are likely to be inside the loop. And so where to locate the throughput manipulator? Typically inside the recycle loop if the location is flexible. If there are multiple recycle loops, you locate the TPM on a common branch so that flows in both the recycle loops are regulated. If the bottleneck is known, typically that bottleneck will be in the recycle loop, and when that is the case, you choose your throughput manipulator at the bottleneck. Regardless of how you choose your TPM, once the TPM location is fixed, the inventory control system is designed around that, with level controllers upstream of the TPM going in the reverse direction of flow, level controllers in downstream of the TPM going in the direction of flow, and so on and so forth. So the first decision is choose your throughput manipulator, and the next, design loops to close material and energy balances around that throughput manipulator location. And what we have in front on the screen are guidelines for where to locate the throughput manipulator. So we've also seen that when you're designing a regulatory plant-wide control system, the key thing is to configure the control structure to transform recycle rate variability out of the recycle loop, whether it's an energy recycle loop or a material recycle loop. Then there should be degrees of freedom, control degrees of freedom for fast local control. We pair locally for fast and tight control. We choose the TPM at bottleneck constraint to transform variability away from the bottleneck, and almost always the bottleneck is inside the recycle loop. Alright, now given a robust regulatory control system, the next issue is how do we ensure good economics? So economics will typically be reflected in an economic objective. So we may have, for example, minimize an economic objective J over the available set points, regulatory layer set points U, degrees of freedom U, and subject to process constraints such as level should not increase, maximum temperature should, there are limits on maximum and minimum flows, material, energy, quality, and so on and so forth. So there are all these constraints, and if you take a degree of freedom U, 1 degree of freedom, and plot the variation in J with U for no disturbance, as you change that set point from min to max, how does your economic objective J vary? This is a minimization problem, and I'm just showing you a particular variation, type of variation. So it's essentially decreasing. If there is a disturbance, the curve may move up or down, it may tilt a bit, but the basic shape of the curve would remain the same. So if you get a disturbance, maybe the new curve is like this, but regardless whether there is a disturbance or not, you can see that if the objective is to minimize J, the optimal operating policy here is to operate at Umax, because whether there is a disturbance or not, J is minimum when U is at Umax. So the optimal operating policy here is operate always at Umax. Alternatively, you may have a variation in J with respect to your degree of freedom, with respect to your set point, as in this figure, monotonically increasing, and even if there is a disturbance, the shape remains similar. You may have shift up, shift down, some tilt here and tilt there. So regardless, because the shape remains similar, the optimal operating policy here that minimizes J is operate U at U min. So operate at U min always. That's the optimal operating policy. Now things start getting interesting. In this case, when you vary U from min to max, the variation is J in J is a valley, and this valley has a minimum, and since you want to operate J at minimum, you would be operating at U optimum, which is shown here. Okay. Now imagine if you are operating at U optimum and the set point is kept fixed at U optimum. Let's say there is a disturbance. Now the shape of the curve will remain the same. However, because of tilts and shifts left, right, up and down, you may have, for a disturbed condition, for a large enough disturbance, the revised J versus U shape curve is, what is just showing up on the screen. Now in this case, if you continue to operate here at U optimum, then at the disturbed condition, and the disturbance is unmeasured, you are away from the actual optimum and there is a loss, and this is the loss because you have not readjusted your U to the new optimum. So in this case, we want to operate at U optimum, but U optimum changes with the disturbance, so we need a way of tracking U optimum as there are unmeasured disturbances. So you need control to track the optimum, and this is what is called an unconstrained optimum. See, in the first two cases, the optimum is at a constraint, either max or min. So in the first case it is at max, in the second case it is at min. In the third case, the optimum is neither at min nor at max, but somewhere in between. It's an unconstrained optimum, and this unconstrained optimum moves with disturbances or changes in operating conditions, and so you need to track the optimum, the unconstrained optimum. Here's a very nice, so this results in the what to control paradigm. So if I say, okay, I want economically optimal operation. So if I know that, okay, with respect to degree of freedom U1, the optimum is always at Umax. With respect to this degree of freedom U2, the optimum is always at min. With respect to this degree of freedom U3, the optimum moves. So what is the optimal operating policy? Well, min and max are straightforward. Control, set this set point at max, set that set point at min, and leave it. Things get interesting when you got shifting unconstrained optima, and this is where the what to control paradigm is very useful. It's very useful in this sense. As we discussed in the degrees of freedom chapter lecture, a process has n degrees of freedom. Of those n degrees of freedom, let us say n minus 2 are max and min at optimum. So ultimately you are left with two unconstrained degrees of freedom, because whatever is at max, whatever is at min, those should be kept at max or min for optimum operation. So that takes care of that. With respect to the unconstrained degree of freedom, we have the choice of controlling a process variable or choosing a specification variable corresponding to that unconstrained degree of freedom. Choosing a process variable as a specification and specifying a process variable is equivalent to controlling it. So now we start asking what should we specify or what should we control so that the change in the optimum value of that specification or of that controlled variable with disturbances is small, and because the change is small, the loss is small. You remain nearly optimal, if not exactly optimal. And this idea is neatly explained in this figure. So this is, let us say, a specification variable that we have decided that we will try and control this corresponding to that unconstrained degree of freedom. At the nominal condition, the optimum is in front of you. Let's say there is a disturbance. The curve moves to the blue curve. However, the optimum remains very close to the nominal optimum. So now in this case, if you do not re-optimize, the loss from the disturbed optimum due to no re-optimization from the nominal optimum remains negligibly small, acceptably small. So the key idea is the optimum remains invariant or nearly the same regardless of changes in operating conditions or disturbances. So what we want to do is find those magic process variables where the optimum remains invariant or is nearly invariant. And what this does is this allows you to operate the process at a constant set point for that magic variable, and if you keep that magic variable at that constant set point, near optimality is assured. So this is the what to control paradigm. So if you ask for optimal operation, for economic process operation, what are the process variables that we should control? Well, you should control all the active constraints and maintain them at minimum or maximum depending on where the constraint gets active, at the minimum or the maximum. And then you should control these magic process variables, which I call economic controlled variables. Skogestad calls them self-optimizing controlled variables. These economic CVs ensure that the process operation remains near optimal at constant set point. So now I'll walk you over the Skogestad example just to understand this properly. So let's say you're a runner and your control degree of freedom is the amount of effort you're putting in running. And let's say the scenario is a 100-meter sprint, a 100-meter dash. What's the optimal operating policy? Well, since it's a short 100-meter sprint, obviously the operating policy is to minimize, the economic objective is minimizing the race completion time. And so the optimal operating policy, how should you vary your running effort so that you complete the race in minimum time? Well, it's obvious, 100%. Run as fast as you can, maximize, put as much effort as you can, and that will correspond to minimizing the race completion time. Now let's consider a different scenario. You got the same runner, control degree of freedom is the same running effort, but now the scenario is you're running a 40-kilometer marathon. And the degree of freedom remains running effort. Objective is you want to minimize race completion time. Of course, you may say, okay, because it's a long race, I'm not going to put 100% effort. I'll put maybe 20% effort or 10% effort or 30% effort. And I'll keep my effort or the force applied constant at 30%. So a constant effort applied. You know that that's not a great idea, because you can be running upwind, downwind, uphill, downhill, and initially 30% running effort and later on 30% running effort. They are two very different things. Initially you're fresh, 30% effort will seem like a breeze. Towards the end of the race, 30% effort would seem like, oh, that's too much. So obviously this is not a great idea. So the runner says, okay, I should not be putting in constant effort. Maybe what I should be doing is run at a constant speed and then optimize the set point of that speed. What should be my speed? So that, and I'll run at constant speed by adjusting my effort. So what you have is the runner is trying to run at a constant speed, and the speed set point, he has some algorithm to optimize it, that okay, this is the constant speed at which I'll run. We also know that this may not be the best idea, because when you're running uphill, every runner knows if you're running uphill, reduce your speed, otherwise you'll get tired, you'll burn out of gas, your muscles will get overly tired, and then you can't run later. On the other hand, if you're running downhill and if you keep maintaining the same speed, that will be stupid. You're running downhill, increase your speed. Let the downhill direction help you. Somebody is trying to help you, take that help. Do not refuse that help. Okay, so obviously constant speed is also not a great idea. So then the runner says, okay, so I will adjust my speed set point, but what should I hold constant in order to adjust my speed set point? Yeah? And then he says, okay, breathing rate maybe, because breathing rate is a good reflection of how tired you are. So initially maybe you can run faster, and towards the end, or when you're running uphill, your breathing rate will go up, and then in order to maintain the same breathing rate, you will reduce your speed. Okay, so maybe this is what you do, breathing rate controller, and then you optimize your breathing rate set point, and then this constant breathing rate set point running policy is a policy that gives you nearly, if not exactly, minimum time for the runner. So you see, what you control corresponding to the unconstrained degree of freedom makes a dramatic difference on how close or away you are from the optimum. Constant effort, lousy policy. You'll be very, your race completion time, if you end up completing it, will be very far away from the best that was possible. Do this, maybe it's slightly better, but it will still be far away from the best that is possible. Do this and you may be much better off, in the sense you may not be exactly at the optimum, but you will be nearly optimum, not too far away from the best that was possible. Okay, so that's the idea of self-optimizing control, or economic controlled variable corresponding to unconstrained degrees of freedom. What variable do I control so that my process operation remains near optimal? That's the idea. Okay. Of course, to get what to control, you need process insight. Because we have all run, we could figure out, okay, running effort 100%, that's not blah 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 blah. Breathing rate sounds good. That's because all of us have run and it makes sense to us. Yeah, this makes sense, this makes no sense. But for chemical processes, we have no sense of the process, so we better get some understanding of the process, and then that process insight can help us develop operating policies that are nearly optimal. Okay, so process insight or process understanding is crucial. Okay, so given all of the above, our plant-wide control system design steps are: first, do a degree of freedom analysis, then choose the throughput manipulator, design loops for closing all independent material and energy balances around that TPM, radiate outwards from the TPM, check for consistency, ensure that there are no drifting modes, ensure that really all the material and energy balances that need to be closed are actually closed. There's nothing drifting. Example was that stoichiometric imbalance in our toy process. And then choose set points wisely. What do we mean by wisely? Well, wisely means economic considerations, Some of the set points will be max min, others would be unconstrained. Those unconstrained set points need to be manipulated in order to hold that magic process variable or control variable that ensures near optimal operation regardless of disturbances and changes in operating conditions. Okay, so that's the idea. Now let's apply this idea to our, the toy process. Same old, same old. So in this case, and this time we will be looking at 4 reaction kinetic models. The first one is standard elementary reaction kinetics. The second one is power law reaction kinetics. The third one is Langmuir-Hinchelwood reaction kinetics. The fourth one is Langmuir-Hinchelwood with power law. Okay. We'll focus largely on the first one for derivations because derivations are easy for the first one, but more complicated derivations can also be done for 2, 3 and 4. How many control variables? How many control valves? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 control valves. So the control degrees of freedom is 9. Of these 9 degrees of freedom, the 2 column levels don't affect the steady state, and you are also required to run the process at a given pressure, at a constant pressure, so that temperature control can be used for quality control and you can avoid composition measurements. So basically, given pressure and 2 non-reactive levels take away 3 degrees of freedom, so you are left with 6 steady state operating degrees of freedom. What are these 6 degrees of freedom? Well, 2 fresh feeds, 2 for the reactor, temperature and hold up, and 2 for the column, heavy key leakage up the top, light key leakage down the bottoms. Okay, so that's the 6 degrees of freedom: 2 for the fresh feeds, 2 for the reactor, 2 for the column. That's another way of quickly coming up with degrees of freedom. Now for these 6 degrees of freedom, what are the specification variables that we should use? Well, usually production rate would be given. Usually product purity will also be, you're guaranteeing a minimum product purity to the customer. We've also discussed this earlier. For optimal operation, reactor temperature should be as high as possible because that minimizes the recycle load and that will help minimize the boil up in the column for the same production rate. So it minimizes the energy consumption per kg product. You also need to maximize the hold up. So maximum temperature, maximum hold up for the same reasons, maximizing single pass conversion to minimize the recycle and hence the boil up. We are also saying that the impurity in the recycle should be held at maximum, and the maximum impurity may be, say for example, 1%, 2%, but not more than that, because you don't want too much heavy impurity going up the top, because that will typically create fouling issues, that will typically create catalyst deactivation issues and things like that. Heavy things tend to deactivate the catalyst faster, heavy things tend to foul up faster, and so on and so forth. And in this case, C is the heavy product, so you want to keep the recycle of the heavy product limited by a maximum. So there is a constraint on the maximum recycle impurity. So of the 6 degrees of freedom, 5 are now gone. This leaves 1 unconstrained degree of freedom. And now the question is, how should we optimally manage this 1 unconstrained degree of freedom? And I would like to point out that reactor temperature corresponds to degree, maximum reactor temperature corresponds to degree of freedom associated with the reactor. Maximum reactor hold up corresponds to degree of freedom associated with the reactor again. Product purity is a degree of freedom associated with the column. Recycle impurity is again a degree of freedom associated with the column. So the 2 degrees of freedom with the column and the 2 degrees of freedom with the reactor have been exhausted, have been taken by these min-max specifications. The production rate and the remaining unconstrained degree of freedom then correspond to the 2 fresh feeds. One of the fresh feeds sets production, and so the unconstrained degree of freedom corresponds to the second fresh feed. Yeah. So that's that. Now let's look at mode 1 economic operation. What do we mean by mode 1? Mode 1 means production rate is fixed, is given. It has been specified by the big bosses in higher management. This is your production target. And now we want to find the globally optimal control law for the one unconstrained degree of freedom that minimizes recycle rate. So we are wanting to minimize the recycle rate. Our economic objective here is minimize recycle rate, and we've taken minimizing recycle rate as an economic objective because that helps an analysis that is tractable. You can make analytical derivations, some very clean derivations that I'll go about. And note that recycle is essentially unreacted A and unreacted B, and this unreacted A and unreacted B is actually boiled off. So if the recycle is minimized, hopefully the revolver duty must also be getting minimized, if not exactly minimized, nearly minimized. Yeah. So the idea is to minimize recycle rate, and recycle rate is a surrogate or a substitute for column boil up or column revolver duty. And revolver duty is you're buying steam and you're paying for the steam. So that's, and why are we doing minimizing recycle rate? That's because we can get some very clean optimal operating policies by minimizing the recycle rate. Okay. Now let's derive the optimal invariant. So there's 2 degrees of freedom corresponding to the fresh feeds. The unconstrained degree of freedom corresponds to one of the fresh feeds. The other feed is getting used to, the degree of freedom corresponding to the other feed is getting used to specify production. Okay. So if production is fixed, and we are looking at kinetic model 1, elementary kinetics, we want to minimize recycle rate at given production P. What are the constraints? If the production rate is fixed, then the generation of the product in the reactor at steady state must be equal to the amount of product being discharged from the process in the product stream. So that's the overall material balance, and what that says is rate of generation of C on the left hand side in the reactor must be equal to the amount of C being discharged from the process, which is P times XCP. That's overall material balance. We want a relationship, we want to get recycle rate in terms of XA and XB. Okay. So what I want to say is there's 2 unconstrained degrees of freedom corresponding to the fresh feeds. One goes for production, the other we don't know what we're going to do with it. We want an optimal control law. So the way the treatment is going here is, let XA and XB be the 2 degrees of freedom specification variables corresponding to the degrees of freedom associated with the 2 fresh feeds. So XA and XB should be such that the generation of C in the reactor must match production. That's the first constraint. Of course, because our objective is to minimize recycle, we need an analytical expression of how recycle will vary with XA and XB, with the 2 specification variables corresponding to the 2 degrees of freedom. Now in order to get the recycle rate, we do a balance on the column, and that balance is the unreacted reactants balance on the column, and that balance is as follows. Basically, you see, R plus P must be equal to E. R plus P must be equal to E. So the amount of A and B coming in is this on the right hand side, R plus P, which is E, times XA plus XB. That's the amount of A going into the column. A and B, unreacted reactants, total unreacted reactants going into the column is P plus R times XA plus XB. That's the right hand side of this equation. Left hand side is amount of A and B leaving up the top, amount of A and B leaving down the bottoms. Leaving up the top is this recycle term, leaving down the bottoms is this P term, the P term, product term, and 1 minus XA. It's a ternary system, so XA plus XB must be equal to 1 minus XC. So for the recycle stream, for the product stream. So the left hand side is A and B leaving the column. Okay, now a bit of derivation is required, so we'll do it right here. Let's differentiate this second, the column material balance, and my unknowns are R, XA and XB. I've got three unknowns. Production rate is fixed, the other compositions are known. Rate constant is fixed by the reactor temperature, reactor volume is fixed at max, so reactor volume is also fixed. So we are left with XA, XB and R. So let's differentiate number 2, and if you differentiate it, then we'll get dr times 1 minus xcr plus maybe not. This is not the best way of doing it. Control Shift 7. Okay, so let's collect R and P terms together. So R terms on one side, P terms on the other side. So we'll have R times 1 minus XCR minus XA minus XB. This must be equal to P times XA plus XB minus plus XCP minus 1. So that's just rearranging the above equation, and now differentiate both sides. So then what you will get is dr times 1 minus XCR minus XA minus XB minus R into dXA plus dXB this should be, P is fixed, it's given, this should be equal to P times dXA plus dXB. By the way, in the equations written above, the variables are shown in the magenta color and the constants are shown in the blue color. Okay, so what that means is dr into 1 minus XCR minus XA minus XB should be equal to R plus P into dXA plus dXB. Now for optimality, dr, okay, between XA and XB only one is independent because one of them is getting fixed to give you a production. So let us, without loss of generality, we'll just say okay, dXB is independent, dXA is dependent, or dXA, XB is independent, XA is fixed by the material balance, overall material balance. Okay, so if we treat XB as independent, then dividing by dXB both sides, what we get is dr by dXB times this guy should be equal to R plus P times dxa by dxb plus 1, and at optimum, because R is being minimized, this guy must go to 0. If this guy has to go to 0, the only way that can happen is if dxa by dxb plus 1 is equal to 0. What that means is this guy must be 0 for this to hold, and what that means then is dxa must be equal to minus dxb. This comes from optimality. Okay. Now that we have this, differentiate the overall material balance. So what we will have is xa times xb will be is equal to P by kV times xcp. Right hand side is a constant. Differentiate both sides, then what you get is xb times dxa plus xa times dxb is equal to 0, because right hand side is a constant, and therefore we know that dxa must be equal to minus dxb, so we will have xb minus xa times dxb is equal to 0. This is obtained by substituting dxa is equal to minus dxb. This will hold true when this is 0. This will be 0 when xb is equal to xa. You see, we minimize the recycle rate for this reaction kinetics by holding A and B in the same proportion in the reactor. That's the optimal operating policy for minimizing recycle rate, and the hope is that if the recycle rate is minimized, our reboiler duty must also be getting nearly minimized, if not strictly minimized. Okay, that's the hope. Alright, so to minimize recycle rate, this seems like an excellent xb is equal to xa, or holding A and B in the same proportion in the reactor is an optimal operating policy. Okay, so that's what I'm going to reiterate here. Optimality condition, of course, treating xb as independent is 0. dr by dxb must be equal to 0, and xb is that we're taking xb as the degree of freedom, or the variable corresponding to the degree of freedom corresponding to the unconstrained degree of freedom. And from the second constraint, this is what we get. Differentiate this is what you get, and from this, because dr by dxb must be 0, that's what you get. dxa by dxb must be equal to minus 1. Differentiating 1, xa xb is equal to constant, differentiate that's what you get, and from there what you get is xa is equal to xb. That's the optimal operating policy. Okay. Now let's look at mode 2 optimal invariant. Very similar. What is mode 2? We want to maximize production. Instead of minimizing R, now our objective is to maximize P, and when you try to maximize P, obviously there will be some bottleneck, and that bottleneck, for the sake of convenience and analytical derivations here, we are taking as the recycle rate cannot go beyond R max. So P max is limited by R max. When you reach R max, production cannot be increased any further, and that sets P max. Okay, so we want to maximize production P subject to bottleneck R max. Okay, constraints as usual: overall material balance, And note, in this case P is a variable. Column unreacted reactants material balance, that's as follows. Note here that Rmax is a specification now, it's not a variable. You are at Rmax and Rmax is fixed. So in this case you have P, XA and XB as variables, and do the same thing as we did previously, except that here dP by dxB should be equal to 0, the optimality condition. Differentiate number 2, constraint 2, the overall material balance on the overall unreacted reactants balance on the column. You differentiate that, this is what you get. Set dP by dxB is equal to 0, and again what you get is dxa by dxB must be equal to -1. Differentiate the overall material balance, constraint 1, and in this case you've got P on the right hand side. Right hand side is not a constant because P is a variable. When you differentiate, that's what you get, but then dP by dxB must be 0 for optimality. Invoke that again, and again the same condition comes out, XA must be equal to XB, implying that if I hold A equal to B, A and B in the same proportion in the reactor, then if Rmax is the bottleneck that limits production, holding A equal to B will maximize production. That's what it means. So these are some very nice derivations, analytical derivations, and that is why we chose recycle rate as the economic objective to be minimized rather than boil up or something else or money. Nevertheless, these insights can be used quite constructively. Now, interpretation. Mode 1. What is mode 1? Production is fixed. You want to minimize the recycle rate. If you want to minimize the recycle rate, then obviously the A-B concentration in the reactor should be minimum. A plus B concentration, because recycle is essentially A plus B. So A plus B concentration in the reactor should be minimum. So to minimize A plus B reactor concentration, what that means is you want to minimize XA plus XB. What that gives is dXA by dXB is equal to -1. And then of course XA times XB is equal to constant. What that gives is XA is equal to XB. That's pretty intuitive. Mode 2, you want maximum production rate. If you want maximum production rate subject to Rmax, then the concentration of C in the reactor should be maximum. That's how you will get maximum P. Okay, to maximize the concentration of C in the reactor is again equivalent to minimizing A and B in the reactor. And you recover back this condition, and then XA XB must be equal to a constant times, must be proportional to the production rate, and if you differentiate this, you again get XA equal to XB. So there is a very neat interpretation from physical reasoning as to why XA equal to XB is the optimal operating policy, or holding A and B in a fixed proportion in the reactor, and that fixed proportion is hold them equal. A and B, A should be proportional to B, exactly. A should be equal to B. Okay, as we derived optimal invariants for the other reaction kinetics in a similar manner, maybe you can do that as an exercise and try it for yourself. Notice XA is equal to XB for elementary reaction kinetics, B times XA is equal to A times XB. In both these cases, we are basically saying for elementary kinetics, we are saying XA by XB should be equal to 1. For power law kinetics, we are saying XA by XB should be equal to A by B. But for both these cases, for both these kinetics, what we are basically saying is A by B in the reactor should be a particular value. The ratio of A to B should be fixed. And what is that fixed value? That depends on whether it is elementary kinetics or power law kinetics. In the other cases, we get slightly more complicated expressions, but the point remains. Let us say A is much larger than B. If A is much larger than B, let us say adsorption equilibrium constant of A and B are similar. If they are similar, well, then the right hand side would be 0, right hand side would be 0, and then again the optimal operating policy will be hold A by B in a constant ratio. Even if they are not similar, even then, let's see, let's say that's 10 minus 1 divided by 9 divided by 1 plus, okay, so let us say the right hand side is 2 half. Okay, I don't know how that will work, but the idea coming out from all this is that even though the kinetics is different in kinetic model 3 and kinetic model 4, if the right hand side is small, A by B in ratio is actually nearly optimal. So an economic CV that comes out of this analysis is holding A by B ratio in the reactor constant, regardless of kinetics. Okay. Of course, the practical case is you want to minimize boil up, not recycle rate. You want to minimize boil up or reboiler duty at a given production. Recycle rate and boil up are correlated, but they are not linearly related. Okay. Mode 2, you want to maximize production subject to maximum boil up as bottleneck, maximum boil up corresponding to the column flooding. That's the bottleneck. So the bottleneck corresponds to flooding. And what are the candidate economic CVs? You know, that magic variable corresponding to the one unconstrained degree of freedom that was left. Well, we can try the reactor B mole fraction XB, which is how conventional control is done. Our analysis is showing XA by XB may be a good idea. Holding A by B in the reactor in proportion may be a good idea. We could also have, this equation. You could have the left hand side minus the right hand side equal to 0 is the optimal operating policy. So we could also have right hand side minus the left hand side equal to 0. So you are controlling this variable RHS minus LHS, this variable, you are controlling this variable to 0. These global invariants have been derived from our analysis. Okay. So these are our candidate economic CVs, and I just wanted to show you mode 1 for the kinetics that we had. What is the loss? See, when you go from nominal condition to disturbed condition without readjusting the set point, without readjusting the decision variable, without readjusting U for the new optimum at the disturbed condition, then clearly at the disturbed condition, because you have not re-optimized the set point or U has not been re-optimized, clearly you will be away from optimum, and how far away from optimum you are, that is called loss, and you put that on percentage basis, percentage with respect to the actual optimum. So what we are plotting here is for mode 1, how does the loss, percentage loss, vary with production rate. Nominal production rate is 100. When A by B is held at the nominal optimum value, reactor A by B concentration is held at the nominal optimum value, or B when reactor B mole fraction is held constant at the nominal optimum value. And what you can see is when A by B is held constant, the loss in mode 1 for all reaction kinetics is actually quite small for mode 1. On the other hand, loss for mode 1, when X reactor B is held at the nominal optimum, X reactor B is held constant at the nominal optimum value, you can see the dashed line, the loss is actually noticeably more. Kinetic model 3, 4%, 5.5% extra boil up. Okay, kinetic model 4, 2%, 2.5%. Here it may be, I don't know, 0.1, 0.2%. Yeah. So for mode 1, significant advantage to holding A by B ratio in the reactor, economic advantage to holding A by B ratio in the reactor compared to holding X reactor B, which is the conventional practice. Mode 2 similarly, I mean it's not as dramatic as mode 1, but there is still a difference in the sense that 1%, 1.2% extra throughput, loss in throughput. The loss in throughput here is maybe, I don't know, 0.1, 0.2%, 0.15%, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so even in mode 2, you may get 1.5, 2% extra throughput compared to when you're operating at constant X reactor B. So by holding A by B, you get higher production and lower steam consumption compared to when you're running at constant X reactor B, which is the conventional practice. This is what this figure is showing. We are going to be looking at more detail. We are going to be looking at KM3 in more detail. If you look at comparison of A by B, there's also the global invariant that we can hold constant. So if you hold the global invariant for KM3 constant, then you get the blue curve. The loss is the blue curve when you are holding the global invariant. The magic process variable is the global invariant. On the other hand, when you are holding A by B constant, the loss is over here, so it's about 0.4% in mode 1. In mode 2, it's about 0.1%. When you're holding the invariant, it's about 0.06%. So clearly the invariant is better than A by B constant, but nevertheless A by B constant is much better than, as shown in the previous figure, much better than holding X reactor B constant. So I hope that's clear. Okay. So constant reactor A by B ratio is a good economic CV for all reaction kinetic types. That's what we have seen. And now the next question is, okay, so if you want to hold A by B ratio in the reactor, then you have to measure A composition in the reactor, you have to measure B composition in the reactor, and measuring A and B composition in the reactor, measuring composition is cumbersome. Unless the government requires you to measure the government or customer requires you to measure the composition, and for some regulatory reasons or for some quality assurance, typically compositions are not measured because they are expensive, they take a long time, they requires effort, unreliable. You do a titration 3 times, you will get 3 different readings, and sometimes the whole titration will get messed up because, I don't know, the base got mixed into the acid or the acid got mixed into the base, and so on and so forth. So we want some kind of a method by which A by B ratio in the reactor can be inferred without actually measuring the composition. Now, because the amount of A and B leaving the bottoms is negligible, in fact the simulation that we have done is for 99% pure product, so the A and B leaving the product is only 1%, A plus B leaving the product is only 1%. So what that essentially means is XA by XB is approximately the same as XA recycled by XB recycled. What that means is this. And if you are running your column to prevent leakage of C up the top, and if the leakage of C up the top is negligibly small or held constant at a fixed value, then the top tray temperature is due to A and B, negligible C, and if this tray temperature is increasing, what that means is B is accumulating and A is depleting, and if this tray temperature is decreasing, then A, which is the lighter component, is increasing relative to A, B is decreasing. So T top is a good inferential measure of the A by B ratio in the recycle, and because the A by B ratio in the recycle is approximately the same as the A by B ratio in the reactor, we can say T top is a good inferential measure of A to B proportion in the reactor. Okay, so that's our economic CV that we are proposing. And all of this is coming from physical insights about the process. None of this is mumbo jumbo, some numerical fad. So T top infers reactor A by B ratio, and we also quantified the loss when T top is held constant. And you can see T top, the blue curve, is very similar to what? Is very similar to the invariant actually, and constant A by B. So T top is a good inferential economic CV. And now we start designing the control structures. In fact, maybe there will be only one control structure. So the bottleneck here is flooding in the column. Because the bottleneck is flooding in the column, that means Vmax, we want to control Vmax very tightly. How do we control Vmax very tightly? By having the throughput manipulator add the steam into the column, into the reboiler. And steam to the reboiler is the throughput manipulator. When this set point goes beyond Vmax, the low selector actually sets Vmax, and then even though you are saying give me more steam, increase the production, but you will not increase production because now you are at Vmax. This low selector will make sure that the set point going into the steam flow controller is no more than Vmax. Okay. Now Vmax is not available for temperature control, or vapor boil up is not available for temperature control. So what we have to do is we'll have on the column level control this way. Throughput manipulator is done, so let's design the control system around that throughput. So level control will be this way, flow control, pressure control, level control, that's standard. Temperature control cannot be done this way on the column, so we'll do temperature control this way, so that's temperature control. Now level control cannot be done this way, so level control will be done that way with one of the fresh feeds. Of course, that's temperature control. Level control is done this way, and then A is maintained in ratio with B. You have for stoichiometric feed balancing the reactor B mole fraction being held by adjusting the A to B ratio. Composition controller closing the stoichiometric feed balance. And then of course, because we have these now okay, this is the basic regulatory control system. Now we start putting in economic loops on it. What does economics say? Economics says hold the product quality at minimum. That's how you do it. You adjust the temperature set point using a quality controller, where the set point for the quality controller is the minimum quality guarantee that you're giving to the customer. Okay. What's the next? Okay, so you have to have this at maximum. That's the next economic thing. You have to have the level at maximum. That's the next economic thing. You also have to have the C in the recycle rate at maximum, so that's the composition controller doing this. And once all these four constraints are there, Vmax is another constraint, TPM is fixed, so we are left with only this set point, how to manage this magenta set point, the B mole fraction in the reactor. And what is being said is, if economic CV is XB, we'll say okay, we are holding XB. That's the economic CV, but that's not a good economic CV as revealed from our analysis, because when you are holding XB constant and production rate changes, there's a large loss in mode 1 and mode 2. So what we do is T top, and because T top holds the A by B proportion, it also does the job of stoichiometric feed balancing. So this is the recommended control structure CS2. CS1 is holding XB constant, CS2 is holding T top constant. Okay, so these are our two control structures. Here the economic CV is T top in CS2. Now let's look at mode 1 throughput change response. Remember, in CS1 XB is held constant, in CS2 T top is held constant. So the left plot is for CS1, right plot is for CS2. I draw your attention here, in mode 1, when CS1 is being held constant and throughput is changed by plus 10% and minus 10%. You can see that the column boil up, in this case the optimum boil up is the blue curve, blue dashed curve, dotted curve. The optimum boil up when you're increasing throughput is this. The boil up at which the process ends up is higher, noticeably higher than the optimum. On the other hand, the boil up at which you end up using CS2 is only very slightly above the actual optimum. So you are nearly optimum, both for a production increase and a production decrease. You are suboptimal both for a production increase and a production decrease. The suboptimality for production increase is more than the suboptimality for production decrease. And how do you explain this? Well, look at this guy. You're holding the reactor B mole fraction constant, so here the control system acts to bring the deviating reactor B mole fraction back to set point. On the other hand, over here the optimum reactor B set point, oh, this is actually 20% increase in production. So you go from 100 to 120 kilomoles an hour, not 10%. Okay, so the optimum reactor B mole fraction is 0.315. The T-top controller actually adjusts the ratio set point such that the final X reactor B at which you settle is closer to 3.315. It may not be exactly the same. Okay, so because you are increasing the mole fraction of reactor B for a production rate increase and decreasing the mole fraction of B for a production rate decrease, you are getting closer to the optimum reactor B mole fraction, and because of that the suboptimality is almost negligible in CS2. So that's that. For plus 20% throughput, the CS1 boil up is about 7% higher than the CS2 boil up. For minus 20% throughput, the CS1 boil up is about 3.6% higher than the CS2 boil up. So you can see that both for production increase and decrease, CS1 is consuming more steam in the reboiler. Why is this crucial? 7% doesn't seem like a lot. Well, if you consume 7% less steam, let's take the average of these two, so maybe 4.5-5% less steam throughout the year because you're using CS2 instead of CS1, integrated for an entire year, that will convert into lots of savings, crores of rupees of savings, or millions of dollars in savings. We also looked at catalyst deactivation. So the catalyst activity goes from wherever it is to 80%, 20% decrease in catalyst activity. And if CS1 is implemented where you're holding the reactor B mole fraction constant, then you can see that if the optimum boil up is the blue line, the boil up at which you end up is substantially higher. On the other hand, if you are holding T-top constant, the boil up at which you end up is only very slightly above the optimum. So you are nearly optimum when you are holding T-top constant. And the reason again can be traced back to X reactor B being moved in the right direction. So even though it does not reach the strict optimum, nevertheless the increase in X reactor B significantly mitigates the suboptimality. On the other hand, in CS1 the reactor B mole fraction remains the same, and therefore the suboptimality is noticeably higher. And in this case, as the catalyst deactivates, the 20% for 20% deactivation, your CS1 boil up is 12% more than CS2. And please note, production rate changes and catalyst deactivation, these will keep happening over the entire year. So 12% advantage here, maybe the average deactivation over the entire year, so 6% advantage is only 10%, so 6% advantage here plus maybe 3 or 4% advantage there, that's 10% overall advantage. So 10% lower on average steam consumption using CS2, that's dramatic. If in mode 2 production cannot be changed. The only disturbance in mode 2 is catalyst deactivation. So in mode 2, if the catalyst deactivates, you can see again here the optimum production, maximum production is 105, I don't know, 105.7474, and when you're controlling T-top, your production ends up being only very very slightly below the optimum. On the other hand, the production ends up being somewhat more below the optimum when you're using CS1. The difference is not as dramatic as in mode 1, but nevertheless there is a difference, and this is again traceable back to the change in the reactor set, reactor mole fraction in the right direction. Yeah, with 30% deactivation, CS1 production is about 0.8% lower. Not very dramatic, but again, if you integrate even 0.5% higher production over the entire year, the savings are going to be dramatic, millions of dollars, crores of rupees. Okay. So in summary, what we have done or shown is that what to control holds the key to effective plant-wide control, and what to control is primarily determined by economics. Control all active constraints, control those magic process variables called self-optimizing control variables for unconstrained degrees of freedom. Proper choice of throughput manipulator inside the recycle loop ensures robust regulation, and we saw this in the last lecture. 25% extra throughput benefit in the ester example. Self-optimizing control variables for unconstrained variables can result in significant energy savings. 7 to 12% energy savings in example reactor separator recycle process. Presented approach provides method to the madness that plant-wide control can be. So that completes all the technical stuff that I wanted to tell you. The next couple of lectures, or maybe one lecture, is going to be just a case study on a more realistic process, because this process was a toy process. Maybe we'll do the cumene process and the hydrodealkylation process, or one of these processes, maybe both these processes, and that will be the last lecture. Go over that and then we're done. Deadline for making all the online material available is May 15th, so I think I should be able to complete it, because today is 11th May. That's that. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye. Salam. Namaste. Keep safe.